Computers. We all use computers all around us. Sometimes it will be for work, sometimes it will be for gaming, sometimes it will be something else. Probably for content consumption, content creation, a whole slew of other stuff that you can do with a computer. After all, the silicone is very versatile, and we sometimes take it for granted. And as someone who's quite an enthusiast at tech, you may sometimes ask yourself this age-old question. How much of computers do we need to know to build the absolute banger of a PC that I want? Now fret no more, because I got it all prepared again. So I got onto PC Part Picker because I can't really do IRL shopping because I'm stupidly broke. Sad. So instead, I'm going to be shopping online. With a little help of Amazon and a little bit of help of whatever PC Part Picker has, we're gonna try to build up a rig for 4 specific different types of people. And here I got myself a list of profiles of 4 different types of people that we're gonna look into and try to build up a spec sheet for those kinds of people and explain what goes into my mind as I select certain parts. Now as you can see it with the first profile, this is going to be a regular thing because currencies are confusing to me and I'm practically everywhere. So instead, I'm just going to simulate picking parts based on how powerful each of them are. So based on each of these profiles without a budget, we're gonna try to build a specifically suitable computer for them without absolutely blowing the living budget. We're gonna be a little bit realistic with this. So let's start with the first person. The first person happens to be a university student, primarily low to medium requirement kinds of games. Example, League, oh god, Valorant, and Apex Legends. Watching university lectures through YouTube and online school portals, having online classes through Zoom or Google Meet. So basically, a standard all-rounder is what I'm thinking about right now. But considering how we got a little bit of Valorant and a little bit of Apex, I'm thinking we may need to, from the average scale, bump up the graphics a little bit. But I think we will do fine with a pretty chill processor. Let's get straight into creating a sheet. Right, now that we're on PC Part Picker, we're gonna get into starting the build. Alright, with that said, we're gonna start out with 2 of the most important criterias. The person wanted to game, but they also wanted to be able to attend online classes. So we're gonna need 2 out of 3 GPU and a 1 out of 3 CPU kind of split. It may sound a bit funny and may sound a little bit weird for all of you tech enthusiasts, but hear me out, hear me out. Usually I would visualize this in a graph in my mind, but it's a little hard to get it out of my mouth. So we're gonna start a little simple. So a pretty simple CPU, I would say sometime around, but if the said person's not really too big of a rush when it comes to getting the absolute latest of tech, I would say the 12600K or the 12600 would be fine. The reason why I'm not going any lower like 12400 is because Windows 11 as a requirement is starting to become a lot more demanding these days. And with Intel's new core architecture, where it has P cores and E cores, I honestly think Windows would be kind of strained on the E-core side for simple tasks like navigating the start menu and going through the even so smaller stuff, which could hold back the operating system a little bit in my opinion. Although AMD Ryzen would be the budget choice for some builds, in my opinion, the old architecture arrangement may be a little bit spread out, I guess, considering how all the cores are treated exactly the same and Windows may just occupy all the cores, which then leaves them all busy, and it could just make core performance a little bit less optimized in my visualization, to say the least. I'm not really too sure if it reflects the real world because I've never really have the new Intel's P-core E-core architecture yet. So if we are to pick up the 12th gen, say the 12600, let's see how much that cost. Ooh, that's okay. Don't you think it's a little weird that the 12600 is currently costing double the price of the 600KF? Huh, the Amazon market's a little funny this time. Okay, we're gonna pick up the 12600K first. We're not gonna worry too much because we're just getting started, so we can change just about anything. This is not the first take. We got plenty of lives, so we can change them whenever. So we're gonna start simple. Right, for coolers, I would highly recommend something decently quiet, and usually you would go with Noctuas. However, other brands would be fine if you're really tight on budget. But personally, in my opinion, I really like the Noctua NHU12S. If possible, for aesthetic reasons, you can also pick up the Chromex Black. We're gonna hold on to that. This might change at some point. So does the processor. Right, following that, for memory, personally, I would highly recommend that you would pick up 16 gigs and above because Windows 11 is stupidly demanding. I'm pretty much a heavy user myself. And what I meant by heavy user, I mean like there is at least 4x4 amount of background processors on my taskbar. And I would have at least 1 or 2 primary heavy applications, something like YouTube in 4K and Discord with too many chats open. Though in comparison with gaming, I don't think it's really that heavy. But it would be kind of CPU heavy, to be honest. But even with that, look at this monstrosity! With all my background processors running... Oh shit, it's not 4x4. I got more than that. With all these processors running in background, and I need all of them, look at how much RAM it's taking right now. At least this includes all the applications that I'm using, but Windows itself would take at least 8 of it. At least that's what I've observed with my own laptop that only has 8 gigs of RAM. You can hardly run on that thing with 8 gigs of RAM. So I highly recommend you to pick up at least 16 or more. Though 32 may be a bit overkill for this gentleman right here who only games and attends classes. So 16 gigs is the way to go. And luckily with PC Part Picker, we could just pick something like this. So depending on your setup, if you like faster RAM, oh my god, what am I saying? If you're planning to have multiple sticks of RAM and have multiple channels to be utilized at the same time, which usually means quote-unquote faster bandwidth, as many would say. But in my opinion, I don't really think that matters for that small size of RAM. So I'd rather say if the university student suddenly wants to start gaming harder, I would leave them some room for upgrades. So I would pick a single stick of 16. However, if you have absolutely no plans to upgrade at all, then you would definitely be better off with 2x8s, because 2 channels is always better than 1 when it comes to latency, at least, even if bandwidth does not matter. Now, in terms of RAM types, between DDR4 and DDR5, this would vary significantly with the motherboard that you're going to pick. And this may be a bit of a misstep from me, because we should have picked the motherboard first before we picked the RAM. But the reason why I went for the RAM first is because I wanted the builder to be very price conscious. Because in event the person picks a motherboard that uses DDR5 memory, you're going to be locked behind a really high paywall for the premiumness of DDR5 that is still going on right now. However, you won't have a choice for particularly Ryzen boards. Starting Ryzen 7 Gen, you're going to be on DDR5 only. And there is no DDR4 supported boards in Ryzen 7 Gen, sadly. However, for Intel, they still leave you that kind of option for some gens. I'm sure Intel at some point at a certain gen, they're going to start changing their minds and lock it out. So while we still can, we're gonna make good use of the value portion of this. So we're gonna pick DDR4 for now. Now that we've picked the speed and the type, we're gonna look into the sets of RAM that are available. Now, a whole lot of tech tubers like Linus Tech Tips and Jace 2 Cents would likely be recommending Crucials or Microns, or if you're into significantly shorter latency, you would also pick up Corsair or G.Skill. For someone who's only playing League, Valorant, and Apex, I don't really think RAM latency would actually make a difference for this particular person. However, it would make a tiny difference for timing intensive games. So usually I would just go straight for the value option, which, looking through the price list, or we could just sort it like that, most of which on the value proposition is from Patriot, though I have not really heard of Patriot, so I can't really say much for them. So instead, I'm gonna go with one that I've trusted for a while, from Crucial. Oh right, forgot to mention, the RAM speed does matter at some games, say for example GTA. Though I'm not really a GTA player myself, but I've seen some people with benchmarks that have shown some differences with the stock speed of 21-33 against the speed of 3200 or 3600. Usually for League, Valorant, and Apex, 2666 is perfectly fine, but 3200 would be better than nothing. And let's do some quick research with the 12600K. Now believe me, this build guide is not really going to be for beginner friendly, but it would be nice for you to collect some information. So building up a spec sheet involves a lot of cross-referencing and a lot of cross-checking. Haha, lithography, Intel 7? You are a fucking joke, Intel. For context, Intel 7 is not really 7 nanometer, it's actually 10. Intel is just screwing business people up. Alright, back to our search. We're gonna look through in Intel's official specifications. On memory types, they recommend that they officially support up to 3200 megatransfers per second on DDR4. Anything higher than that would technically be overclocking on the processor's own controller end. So that means if we want to stay on the safe side, we would be better off picking up the 3200. So in this case, we would happily take that because that would be pretty much the fastest officially supported, to say the least. Though RAM overclocking isn't really all that dangerous, it's just that there may be some degree of instability that you might not expect. The chances are hyper slim, but they're never zero. Considering how we're talking about a university student, we wouldn't want crashes to happen so often when they're doing their assignments. So it's always best to stay on the safe side for this guy for now. And on to the motherboard. We could have done the motherboard from the get-go, but I wanted people to be RAM conscious for now. And since we've picked a DDR4 RAM, you can see that PC Part Picker has also grayed out the DDR5 options, leaving us only the options to pick up DDR4 RAMs. That's fine. Now looking through the popularity rating, you can see that the most popular boards are usually one of the higher ends ones. So we're not gonna really look into that. How about we take this a little bit wilder? Considering that we're picking up the 12600K, we're also giving an option for overclocking. Even though we're not intending to overclock, sometimes it's also good to leave him some room for overclocking if he wishes to experiment with it. Say they graduated or something. So for that, we're going to outright miss out on the B series, because on Intel's side, the B series motherboards are usually non-overclockable, and the H series is below the B series, which means it's a little bit lower end, to say the least. So what we want is to start from the Z series. So we got an option between the Z690 and the Z790. Though I don't really have personal experience with the Intel side of these series of chipsets, but I'm going to try my absolute best to pick out what's really best for the person. Overclocking may sometimes stress out a module called VRM, or voltage regulator module, which usually only happens if you're going to overclock in a really extreme manner. Otherwise, most of the times it should be fine without a heatsink. However, it's always best with a heatsink. We're gonna have a good look at the motherboard and see what they got. In hindsight, we could kind of see that there are heatsinks accompanying the VRMs, even if they're not directly connected. What am I saying even? God damn it. So looking at the motherboard, we can see that there's currently 2 PCIe slots, which are usually used by GPUs and other add-in cards. 4 RAM slots. Looks pretty nifty. I assume it would be 2 channels, because this 2 would be 1 channel, and then this 2 would be 1 channel. And we got heatsinks accompanying the VRM, which looks good in my opinion. And it looks pretty bare bones and very simple. Now let's have a look at the I/O. Looking at the I/O, it does look very bare bones. We got ourselves mic in, line out, and line in. It is very, very simple. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 USB 3.0s and a single HDMI for integrated graphics if you're going to use that, and a single LAN port, which is probably gigabit. Let me just have a good look here. Onboard Ethernet, 1 gigabit. Okay, yeah, it is. So it is a gigabit LAN port. However, with my personal testimonies with a whole lot of different builders, at least a small minority of them have personally told me that they have poor experience with ASRock firmware. However, with many other creators that I've saw, they haven't really talked about issues with it, so your mileage may vary. However, ASRock is already a pretty named brand, so if there's an issue, you can totally RMA it. So that's not too big of a problem. And considering how, in terms of the price range, they start to vary sharply from here on, and we're only needing pretty much the basic abilities for the person, I say it would be nice to give him this motherboard. He can continue to upgrade them if he so needs to. Right, from here we're gonna have some fun, because the harder part is mostly out by now. So we're gonna start with storage. So League doesn't really take that much storage. Valorant takes quite a number. Apex takes a bang ton. I honestly think going full SSD is kind of worth it these days, especially with the current market at least. If we're talking about the lower end SSDs at least, because we want to make sure that this is university student friendly as possible. We don't want this build to be overkill in price. So like I said, this build sheet will change at some point of this video, so don't click away, because you and me, we're going to look into this process and go through the mentality of how I pick parts. Usually I would start somewhere and then I'll change things as we go. So usually I'm a big fan of budget SSDs. And what I meant by budget SSDs, I mean like those lower end, slower SSDs that are still quite fast, faster than HDD, but they don't break your bank. And this is where price per gigabyte starts to become important for you, at least you, because this is kind of the metric that we're going to be using when we're going through some of these SSDs. But first, size. What we want is to start making up our mind about how much gigabytes we want to give this said person. Considering Windows already taking up at least 30 gigs of the system, but let's say this university student has a lot of research papers that they need to store. So we're gonna bring that up a little bit. And now what we want to do, just for safety measure, double it up. We're gonna give him 256 gigs of boot drive and look through the lowest price range for that. Whoopsie, we forgot to set the minimum. Actually, we gotta set the minimum to 240 because some drives can get a little bit funny. I'm talking to you, Kingston. Looking through the lowest list of SSDs, there are a whole lot of what's called the SATA SSDs, which are 2.5-inch drives that are through an interface that is admittedly criminally slow in the current times for an SSD. So to avoid that, we're gonna go back into the filter and go through the interface list and pick up all that is M.2. You can clearly see that I've also picked M.2 SATA. That's primarily because some M.2 slots can switch modes between SATA mode and PCIe mode. So if we do pick up a budget SSD now, the said university student can do an upgrade in the future to something a lot more faster. However, in my personal opinion, M.2 SATA is still a little bit criminally slow, just like I said earlier. So we're gonna take that out. However, if you're into the bare bones from the beginning, you can feel free to have SATA on. We're gonna be dead focused on M.2 SSDs for now. So looking through the price list once more, we got ourselves quite a selection. However, I would personally avoid WD Green because the WD Green is very much of a very passive kind of drive that you would use to just store stuff and never use them as often. It's more of a power budget friendly version of those kinds of SSDs. The regular version of this particular would be the WD Blue instead. And going further down, we're gonna look into, oh hey, we got ADATA XPG SX6000 Pro. However, I'm not going to recommend that drive, especially whatever happened recently. ADATA XPG, I'm looking at you. Whatever you've done back then, the silicon swap, that's not cool. You have pissed me off as a former customer. I built a PC with that SSD on, and I was actually very surprised because I was lucky as hell at the time. I picked up one that had the Samsung chip in it. For those who are wondering, the XPG SX8200, okay? The 8200 Pro is amazing when you have the Samsung chip on it instead of the other inferior chip. We did a whole lot of series of testing and the boot times were impressive. The download speeds are impressive. At least it maxes out my internet, that kind of impressive. Doing anything with transfers on that drive was super impressive. However, after the chip swap, I don't know if I can trust you anymore, ADATA. Like, I was going to trust you until you did this shit to me. You betrayed me, bro. So instead, we're gonna go further down. Ah yes, the Kingston NV2, the Yeo trusted budget-friendly SSD. Now, personally, I'm using the Kingston A1000, which is kind of like the slightly inferior, older version of this. And it is safe to say, in my opinion, that it is adequately fast, though the boot times are not as impressive, maybe about like 7 seconds or 10 seconds, but it is still just as fast as what a basic PCIe NVMe SSD would do. So considering we're gonna hunt for the budget for this university student, I would happily pick that up for this person. Absolutely in a heartbeat. However, if you do want faster, there's always better choices out there. Say, for example, the Corsairs and the Samsungs, but we're not gonna look into that, but we'll get into that in a moment. However, we could add additional storage if budget allows us. We're gonna allow ourselves a leeway of budget this time, and instead we're gonna switch to the 3.5-inch drives, which are usually the HDDs, and we're gonna use SATA interface because there's no such thing as M.2 HDDs. And we're gonna hunt for the budget options. Now, if you're into the second-hand market, you will be very familiar with the Western Digital Caviar Blue. The Caviar Blue is, if anything, the tried and true budget king for HDDs in that kind of budget price range. However, there are more and more affordable HDDs out there that are slightly better in quality and does not do tomfooleries like what Western Digital did with the red drives. I'll attach those articles on screen so you know what I meant by that. So my trust with WD is a little bit fractured because of what they've done there. However, this goes without saying, I still want to give them some chances. We're going to do what we usually do. So the capacity I want to give them would be, I'll say 1 terabyte would be the basic go-to. We're gonna have our capacity target starting from 1 terabyte. And as you can see, we have a whole slew of choice, but I personally would not pick up non-popular drives that are up there because personally, if you haven't had other people with experience of those drives, it will be really hard for you to tell if this is good or not. So I've never really heard of AVGP. I don't think I've done any personal research of the Constellation ES3, so I can't really speak for those drives at all. However, what I can speak for is the basic Seagate Barracuda, WD Carvia Blue, and the standard blues. They're technically the same thing anyways. I mean almost. They do differ by speeds. These are usually the gambits of budget HDDs. And if you're just looking to store some university stuff that you won't touch as much as often, or you just want to store some basic memories, I would probably recommend picking up the Seagate Barracuda. But if you're starting to keep important memories like, say, family photos and stuff, I highly recommend using cloud storage instead, or get a longer lasting HDD, which are not those drives I just mentioned. Okay, so we picked out storage for the say person. Let's get into the video card, the GPU. Ooh, spooky scary. It's one of the toughest things to pick. If you don't have a baseline, say a previous GPU you've used on the desktop scene, not the laptop scene, it would be really hard for you to gauge which GPU you would like to pick up. So for me personally, I have used the GT 730, the GTX 1080, the RTX 3060, and the AMD RX 5700 XT. My range of GPU selection might be a little bit extra slim, so knowing that this person's going to be playing League, Valorant, and Apex, usually I can tell that this person's going to use a 1080p monitor. It's unlikely for a university student to be using a 1440p or 4K monitor, unless say they're an art student, but considering how the profile just says university student, we're not really too sure if they're really an art student, considering there's no mention about using a drawing pen or any of the sort, so it's likely just 1080p. And also considering the market as of the time of recording, which is the 13th of May, at the moment 1080p is still usually the budget moment for monitors. So if we put this into consideration, League can run pretty much on a fucking toaster, so we don't really need to think about that. Valorant can run just fine on a mid-range graphics card, and Apex would be a little bit more CPU sided than GPU, honestly. We will get into that point later. But with that said, in my personal experience with the RTX 3060, Apex can run absolutely fine on 1080p. So with that considered, we could kind of cut it down a lot further if we're looking into considerations of budget. So we're gonna try to add these two for the moment. Oh, how about the AMD side? We're gonna not leave them alone. We're gonna bring them up to the spotlight. So we're gonna bring in the 6500, 66, 66 XT, 67 XT, and the 7 series as well. The 76, the 77, that should be fine. This will be our current selection of GPUs that we're gonna look into. And looking at the budget options, it's taking us to ASRock, Sapphire Pulse, a whole lot of them that are Radeon RX 6500 XT, but there's also Gigabyte Eagle OC that is a 3056 gig. So this is what we're gonna think a lot about. If this person's not playing any AAA games above Apex or any of the sort, the 3050 would kind of be barely fine on medium settings. But if this person's planning to play anything more than that, then I would highly recommend picking up the 3060 or the equivalent on AMD, which is the 6700. Oh, we could also look at the 4060s, add those into the list, because budget reasons. If we're looking into the 60s already, then you would want to compare against the 30s and the 40s in terms of market prices, because currently the 30 series is coming down in prices, but it's not coming down slim enough to have an excuse to be the budget king yet. At least in my current market in my area. However, in some areas, like say in the Western market, the 3060s would be amazing for budget reasons, and there would be less and less reasons for 3050s to be around. So, considering how they specifically say low to medium requirement games, I'd say the 3050 would do absolutely fine for them, really. There might be some things that I may fail to mention, so please point it out to me in the comments below, because sharing is caring. But for now, we're gonna give them the 3050. Though we could pick up the Radeon RX 6500 XT, but in my personal opinions, the AMD drivers are just about there, but it's not really there, you know. And on the talks about ray tracing, it may be a little bit Say what if the person needs to pick up a ray tracing game, then you know, we're not really there yet. Sorry Lisa, we're not picking you up at the moment. The Gigabyte Eagle OC is a pretty sound option for me. Usually in some areas, brand don't really matter when it comes to GPU. And the cooling performance is usually always better than the Founders Editions. So we're gonna pick those up for now. And as for the case, considering how we've picked up an M-ATX motherboard, a micro ATX motherboard, which means they are a little bit smaller than the standard ATX size, we would have the choice to pick up cases that are smaller than the full towers. So for that, we can select all the ATXs as like a choice for the larger size, and we're gonna pick up all the M-ATXs as well. And let's look through the cheapest case. Let's see what shit show it's going to give me. DIY PC F2. Who is DIY PC? What the heck? Who are you? I've never heard of you. What the fuck? Why do you look like a stolen Cooler Master? What the heck? Okay, I'm not looking at those for now. Jesus. So if the university student is currently living in a set dorm, then size would actually start to matter, and we're gonna have to start worrying about that. So let's look into the Cooler Master box. Let's see how it's like. Interesting. Now, considering if we're picking out a smaller case than standard, you're going to need to start worrying about what's called the clearance. So if you remembered earlier that we've picked the Noctua NH-U12S, we're gonna need to double check if this case is small enough to fit in. If this cooler is small enough to fit in the case, because the smaller the case size, the more we have to worry about all these stuffs. Hence why there's a lot of cross-referencing in computer parts picking. So usually you could just go up to Noctua's website and head to support and look through Noctua's compatibility center. And in Noctua's compatibility standard, you can click on cases and search for manufacturer. So which in this case, we're currently eyeing on the Cooler Master box. So Cooler Master. Let's look at the model number, Q300L. Right, getting back here, and we're gonna search for Q300L. Let's look at the compatibility and see if it's compatible with our coolers that we just picked. So the cooler that we were picking was the NH-U12S, and you can see that there's a green check, which means it's fully compatible. That means it fits. So good, we've basically found a case that suits it. Wait up, before you continue, there's one more thing that we have to worry about when it comes to clearance, the GPU. Because if you zoom in right now, oh Jesus. Because if you zoom in right now, look at how it barely fits a Strix graphics card in the product image. Okay, let's be real. The Strix GPU is a 3-fan card, and the GPU that we just picked up is a 2-fan. So in theory, it should fit just fine. So I don't think I would have to worry about that. However, if you're building a rig with a very long GPU, you're going to have to worry about that. For real, for real. Okay, with that said, the Cooler Master Box Q300L looks amazing. Though I'm gonna pick up the white color because I'm a big fan of white colors, honestly. And now we're gonna get into the big hunka-donka-dong, the power supply. This is where things get a little bit scary. But fret not, PC Part Picker has a power supply calculator that does an estimate of power draw that you might need. With that considered, it's estimated to have 331 watts. You could just trail onto that number, like say pick up a 350, but I wouldn't recommend that. Say if your processor ends up boosting, it's going to start speeding up a lot more. That means it's going to take more power, and then boom, we just lost power. So it's always better to get above it than to go below it. So with that in mind, I would highly recommend, well, the old saying of the rule of thumb would be to double it. I was so tempted to say double it and give it to the next person. Jesus, this is such a brain rot. The old rule of thumb would be to double it and go by that number, but power supplies these days have become efficient enough that you won't have to worry too much. Take that number, half it, and then plus on top of it. So like say 331, we double it, so 662, half it, no, not half it. If we, no wait, half this number, 331 would be like somewhere around 160 or 150, I can't do my math, but say roughly 400, 500 watts, about that. Somewhere around that number, 450 to 500 watts. So I would personally recommend picking up a 500 watt then. So we're gonna start from 500 and go through, I wouldn't say the cheapest because I wouldn't recommend going the cheapest. In fact, I don't even know why I clicked on that. That's stupid. We're gonna pick the top ratings for now. Hold it right there. There's another piece of paper that we have to reference right now. We're gonna create a new tab and search for PSU tier list. You're gonna look for the one that's currently hosted on LinusTechTips.com. Where the hell are you really? And search for this from Linus Tech Tips forum, the PSU tier list revision 16.1. Though there are no newer that I am aware of, So we can only stick with that for now, until Linus Tech Tips manages to finish testing all the PSUs and have a very detailed list in LTT Labs. This will be our current list that we're gonna refer to for now. But don't take it as gospel for now, because when it comes to building PC parts, you're going to have some degree of skepticism when it comes to certain judgment of certain parts. And everything you need to know, like an explanation, is all up here. So please have a good read of that before you go through the list. Instead of going, oh hey, tier A, we'll take these then. Ooh. Sometimes it's fine to go a little bit lower, as long as you're not going into the explosive region. So what we want to look at is currently on the top rating, we got ourselves Seasonic Focus 650 Gold, which is currently about 104 bucks. We're gonna keep scrolling down and see what other power supplies we got that looks interesting to me. Since we said we wanted 500 watts, and we don't need any more than that really. Okay, you know what? Let's just set the filters to probably 650 to be the top. That way we can keep our filters really clean. Right, EVGA. Oh, I miss you, EVGA. Holy. Let's have a look. EVGA Supernova 550 G3. Let's look through the list and Control F EVGA Supernova G3. What tier are you from? An A tier. How interesting. Low priority units. Though I'm not really too good at reading the tier list personally, if it did end up on that high of the tier list, I honestly think it would be pretty good. Though personally I would be picking up only Corsair or Cooler Master PSUs because Seasonic is not available here, sadly. However, Linus has been sponsored by Seasonic so much that they've built PCs with them so much. Almost every build they got has been Seasonic. Have you realized that? That's freaking interesting, doesn't it? If possible, I guess you can try out Seasonic and be your own judge about this. But I am going to pick up the EVGA Supernova. However, we can't really see the price at the moment for the 550 watt, so we're gonna pick up the 650 watt. Wait a second. Are there any 550 watts that has a price? Oh yeah, Corsair does. But the prices are not really all too different from the whole 100 watts difference. So I'm gonna be picking up the EVGA Supernova G3 as the PSU for now. Operating system, Windows 10 is gonna be dead because Microsoft being Microsoft. Though I would personally give them Windows 11 Home. But considering the $30 price difference, I honestly think it's fine to pick up Pro. Now we've got our price list populated, that is at least without the monitor, without any other stuff, without headphones, keyboards, mice and everything, just the PC itself. We've kind of racked up close to $1,000. And honestly, for a university student, $1,000 is like quite a lot of money. So we're gonna see what can we cut down. And we're gonna run through the list once more. Considering earlier when we just mentioned that this person plays Apex. So, and Apex is particularly more of a CPU heavy game than over the GPU. And we would have to make sure that we hold on to the 12600K because I don't think the 12400 can hold on to Apex. Personally, I don't really think so if you have all the background services running as well. So I much rather hold on to the 12600K. So we're gonna keep going through the list and see what else can we cut off from the price list. Looking through the list, honestly, I can't really think of what I can cut down. Though if you do have a suggestion, let me know in the comments below. But if the said university student isn't archiving too much of their assignments and stuff, I think we can kind of just cut off that HDD. Though it would be bad choice for many people, but in my personal opinion, I think that would be the choice. I think we might be able to cut down on the CPU cooler by picking a different model. So if we're going through the lowest of the price list, if we're going hardcore budget friendly, we need something that actually still cools that thing without anything stupid going on. So going through the list, I can kind of see Yeo Trusted Cooler Master Hyper 212, but I think we can get better than that. So we're gonna keep going through the list. Wow, Amazon Basics cooler is here. In case you don't know, Amazon Basics is basically a rebatch Hyper 212. Now that I've looked through the budget section of the list, I think the Hyper 212 would be a solid choice based on my past experience with them. So let's see how much we have cut down. Oh hey, we got down to 900 bucks. So we've saved essentially just 100 bucks less. Can we go any lower than that? Probably. We're gonna see what we can do with this. Apex Legends is still quite a CPU heavy game though, honestly. But if that person knows when to turn off Firefox or Google Chrome or whatever browser they're going to be using, then I think dropping the CPU a little bit lower would be fine as well. So we've already dropped the GPU, so might as well drop the CPU as well. Let's see how much lower we can go. Looking around the market, we could see that there's a 12400F. Let's see what cores they got. The 12400F has only 6 cores, which is likely probably like 2 E cores and 4 P cores. Or maybe just 4 E. Oh, you know what? Let me just do a research real quick. There's no fucking way, right? Oh, they're all P cores. I see. Though if we do pick it up, it would save us a whole lot of money. The problem is that it's not really saving us that much in terms of performance now, isn't it? So honestly, considering how we're already having a GPU, if we are really tight on budget, we would have to save 25 bucks by picking up the 12600KF. So K means overclocked and F means without discrete graphics. What's bad about the F series chips is that you're not going to have integrated graphics, which means for diagnosis purposes, you're not going to have integrated graphics. And this could be quite bad if you do run into, like, say, a PCIe problem, a graphics slot problem, and you have nothing to test out with. Because if the slot don't work, you're not getting a GPU, so that's kind of a problem with that sometimes. Am I really going to sacrifice that? How's the 14600? Oh, that's a whole lot more in pricing. Never mind then, forget I ask. If this person trust their technician more and they're not doing any stupid shit, I think the 12400F would do fine. I think they're going to struggle on Apex a little bit. With a few changes we've made, we're gonna need to redetermine power supply. Now we have a slightly shorter power budget. So say 300, by half is 150. So then 450. So we could hunt out for power supplies that are slightly lower wattage now. So we're gonna start with 450 and end with 550 for the filters. And let's look around the budget, but be wary of the popularity rates. If possible, it would be nice to have some degree of 80 plus rating. So like say bronze, silver, and gold, and anything above that, try to avoid the standard 80 plus because some of which are fakes. If we're talking about the Chinese made ones, they're usually fakes. Right, looking into the budget section, we're gonna look into which one is it that we have been very familiar with this whole time. Seasonic, 550 watt, 80 plus gold, looks pretty good. A whole lot of ratings on Amazon, 12 of them particularly. This thing hasn't blown up so far. Hafidus deletus. Looking at the reviews, there's a whole lot of people that said that it is pretty good. So, and it hasn't blown up on them, I guess. So I guess we could just kind of safely pick up that power supply. Though Seasonic has already had a good deal of popularity, so we're gonna pick that up. And we basically save ourselves another 50 bucks. So our final price at the moment is 754. Now say I'm not giving Windows 11 Pro. How about we give Windows 11 Home instead? That saves us roughly 20 bucks? Yeah, somewhere around there. So we got a bit of savings. Let's see how far can we go further. When it comes to cases, you can pick pretty much any kind of cases, honestly. You can buy a trash can even. If you're an engineer, we're going for it. So earlier I talked about sizing. Considering how we're on micro ATX, just try to stay within micro ATX or larger. And currently, as we see, that master box that we saw earlier is the one that we just picked. However, for some weird reasons, Amazon has this fairly weird and unfamiliar case that I have never seen before in my life, which is the DIY PC F2. Judging by its price, oh, really cheap and feels like it would fall apart at any seconds. Funds are all full. Spend an extra 10 bucks for a better case, please. Though a whole lot of other people are either positive or just outright negative for this. And honestly, I don't know, you be the judge on whether it's worth saving 7 bucks from this. Look at this. It's 47 bucks, okay? And then this is 40 bucks. If you're willing to save 7 bucks, then go for it, as far as I can say. However, there are a whole lot of cheaper cases out there. When I mean a whole lot, I mean like a whole lot. You can easily find one for like 10 bucks even. Just snag one somewhere at the side of the street or something. But we're gonna pick this for now. And this would be our final price, 724.24. And there you have it. Here's my build mentality. Now that we're done with the first person, we're gonna work on the second persons. Okay, so earlier I said that we're gonna have 4 people. I've looked back at the list and I realized that I don't need one of them. So we're gonna do 3 people in total instead. So let's get right into the second person. So scrolling down, we're gonna see that the second person is an AI enthusiast. Oh, we're getting into AI right now. Oh, red flag, red alert, Mallory is an AI. She is not real, she is a robot. Okay, jokes aside, presumably this person wants to experiment with AI to understand how AI things work. So we're gonna give them basically pretty much the basics of AI, I guess. And considering no budget has been mentioned at all, we're gonna go ham with it. And saving money is not really an option for experimenting with AI. So we're gonna get right into it. Right, let's clean up our workbench once more. And we're gonna start with CPU. So most stuff with AI, particularly like say retrieval-based voice conversion, RVC, or AI art, something along the lines of say stable diffusion, or upscaling, something along the lines of using waifu 2x and the like, and maybe AI transcriptions, somewhere along the lines of Story Toolkit AI. These all particularly used mostly GPU because the GPU is the only one that's primarily capable of handling the task due to their insanely high core count in comparison to the core counts that you have on CPU, which is very little. So we're gonna be really focused on the GPU side of things than the CPU. The CPU, all the CPU really needs to do is be a computer that facilitates all that and compile the results, I guess. We're gonna start with CPU. And usually you would have already been picking up on a CPU that would handle a good deal of tasks. So we're not gonna pick up Intel for the time being because we're gonna need the core counts on every core to make good use of it. So we're gonna be sticking to Ryzen for now. This may sound stupid for most tech enthusiasts in my opinion, but hear me out once more. I'm sorry. My brain works in a way that I can't really teach you of. It may sometimes be a little bit stupid, so please bear with me. I may be very, very cringe, I'm so sorry. So we're gonna start with the 7th gen Ryzen because we're gonna need pretty fast RAM, at least fast in the sense that it's fast in mega transfers, because some AI tasks make good use of either the VRAM or your system RAM or both. So we're gonna need to be very prepared for both of them. So we're gonna pick up the 7th gen Ryzen or even the 8th gen Ryzen. Oh, we're not picking up the 8600G. Damn it, AMD, what's wrong with you on the 8th gen? Okay, fine, we'll do the 7th gen. So for this, I'm going to recommend picking up the 7800X3D, the most popular choice up here, because we're gonna need most of the cores and most of the level 3 cache if possible. Basically use everything that's there. Go ham with it. And I'm not a big fan of liquid cooling, honestly. If you're going to go liquid cooling, then might as well go custom tubing because AIO sometimes is way more of a pain to maintain than anything else. It's like there's more complications with AIOs in my opinion. So in my opinion, if you're perfectly fine with your current room environment, you don't mind the size, you can absolutely pick up the gold standard, the Noctua NHD15. And now we're gonna get into the motherboard. This time, we're gonna go ham. When I mean ham, I mean no ham. So we're gonna be picking up the X series chips, which is usually the higher ends of it. You could just pick up the B series chips because there's really not too much affected here, but we're gonna go ham with anything and everything. So we're gonna pick up the X670s and let's see what's the popular choice. The Gigabyte Aorus Elite. Huh. Interesting. And the MSI Pro X670p Wi-Fi. Though we don't really need Wi-Fi at the moment, so I would happily pick that up. Let's have a look at the VRM. Ooh, heat-sinked. Nice. It seems like we're in good business. Right, so we're gonna pick up this baby. And we're getting straight to the memory. So for some AI tasks, they might end up using a little bit more system memory instead of the VRAM. So we're going to need to be ready for that. So at least 32 gigs is, if anything, the bare minimum. If you're doing something like AI training outright, you're going to need a good deal of buffer. I mean, not too much of a buffer. I mean, like say if you do pick up a GPU with a very short amount of VRAM, Windows at some point of time is going to reallocate those RAMs to the system memory as like the backup measure. So you're going to need some extra headroom. So instead of the 16 that I just mentioned, I'd rather you pick up 32 gig personally. So we're gonna start there. DDR5 and we're gonna pick up 2 sticks of 16 so we can make good use of the dual channel. And this is where we can decide on the speed. We're gonna go with a little bit of a populous choice over budget options instead. And we can clearly see that there's a good deal of Vengeance users and a G-Skill Trident Z Neo. So looking through the prices, this is much faster in RAM speeds and it has slightly lower latency as well. So I would pick that up, absolutely. Right, storage. Depending on what you're working on, if you're training AI, we're gonna need a lot of space. Like say approximately going into the hundreds. Maybe if you're training AI art, you're going to need way more than that. But if you're training, like say AI voices like RVC, then you would probably only need ever so little, like roughly around the tens. So we're gonna swing in between of those two extremes and stick with, I say, 1 terabyte of NVMe SSDs. We're gonna make sure we leave no bottlenecks for AI operations. So we're gonna start with 1000 and end that with 2000. You can buy more HDDs in the future if you want, or more SSDs in the future if you do run out of space. But use this as your boot drive, it would be nice. And we're gonna stick with the 980 Pro. Oh hey, look, in the same price, we got the 990 Pro, which usually is much faster. If anything, an upgrade from the 980. Oh hey, it's the 2 terabyte. To those who are picking up the 980 or the 990 Pro, please update your firmware immediately when you're done installing Windows, because there is a fatal chip killing bug on the initial firmware of these drives. You have been warned. Right, following that, this is where we get real serious about it. Usually with AI workloads, you would want to use some sort of workstation GPUs of some sort. But considering this person is just an enthusiast, we're gonna give them consumer GPUs for now, because workstation GPUs are a little bit on the side of being a bit overpriced for the power that it provides, primarily because of the price premium and the fact that it has ECC sometimes. And primarily the fact that it is made for specialized workloads like that, like AI and working on editing videos and stuff. Basically specialist workloads, I guess. But the consumer GPUs are usually just fine. And since we're talking about efficiency, depending on how heavy this AI enthusiast is looking at, we could probably give them a 4080 or a 4070. So we could play around with that. Though with my personal experience, the 3060 is just as good for experimenting with AI. Like if you're just a consumer, an AI consumer rather than an AI trainer, then I think the 3060 is absolutely perfect for it. But let's say if we want to play around in the middle of the two extremes, between just a consumer and a trainer, what if you want to be on the middle of it and you still want to dip your toes into AI and stuff like that? I say be on the middle. So I would say somewhere around the 4070s or this 4070 Super. So, I would give them 4070 Ti Super. Let's see if there's any pretty good ones. Let's see if there's anything really popular by the ratings. Ooh, Asus TUF. It's been a while since I last heard you, holy. There's 16 gigs of VRAM, which is pretty nice. It is not much, but it would do. The reason why I say it's not much is because on my personal experience with being an AI art consumer, as in the sense of we just create content using AI models, that in itself has taken quite a lot of RAM actually. Having 16 gigs or more would be very, very nice. But we can hold on to that for now. Also, to make things really, really clear, I don't use AI art for commercial reasons. I'm only using it to experiment things and understand how they work. Use AI models ethically. And that has been the public service announcement brought to you by Melody Tensei. Right, continuing on. A case. Well, airflow would matter a lot, so we're going straight to the Corsair 400D airflow. And power supply. We're gonna need to worry about power supply from here on because AI workload is a really power intensive operation and its estimated wattage is about 566 watts. If we do the same rule of thumb that I just mentioned, which is half that and then plus over the top of the original number, you would get yourself somewhere around the range of 700-ish. So we're gonna go a little bit above that. We're gonna take 800 watts as a starting point, and we're gonna hold on to that for now. So we're currently being recommended with Corsair RM850E, which is an 80 plus gold 850 watt power supply, which looks pretty decent, honestly. Though if you can find any power supply that's safer than that, or more power efficient than that, like say 80 plus platinum, I would highly recommend picking those up instead. Or even titanium. So like say that Be Quiet Dark Power that has 80 plus titanium, but we don't really need 1000 watts for that kind of build at the moment. But if you do want to future-proof it, this would be a good choice. But what I'm currently looking at is, say probably, what if I want to lock it down to strictly 850? Will we be able to find a titanium around that price? Oh, yes we do. There is a Be Quiet Dark Power, 80 plus titanium, 850 watt. Mel, you've been talking about 80 plus this, 80 plus that, but you haven't really explained what 80 plus is. 80 plus is basically just the percentage of power efficiency when it comes from the wall and then in comparisons to how much it's actually coming out of the power supply to the parts. So 80 plus is basically just a saying of it is 80% plus efficient. So like say there's a bit of 20% power loss here and there inside the power supply itself after some like voltage conversions and stuff. But what you have to worry about is the word after it. That determines its efficiency rate. So titanium is the absolute top, the most efficient basically. So what we want is we're gonna pick up 80 plus titanium, which means we're gonna have the most efficient of power flow into the computer. And operating system wise, depending if you are using Linux or are using Windows, this would differ a lot. But I think this person would likely be dual booting, so we're gonna give them Windows 11 Pro. And with that, we've settled with the price range of 220,679. That is interestingly expensive in my opinion. However, if you're willing to pay that kind of price for experimenting with AI, I say go for it. Because this kind of build is kind of a bit future-proofing in my opinion. Because for me, I like the processor to be a tad ahead of the GPU. When we do fall behind in the times and we do only end up upgrading the GPU, the CPU is not falling behind. And we will still be able to do the workload that we want. So this is also why you would see me picking processors that are a little bit over what the GPU can handle. Future-proofing has been in my mentality this whole time. So yeah, there we have it. 220679. Here we go. Right, let's get on to the third person. Right, let's see what we got. Third person. Oh. Third person, a rhythm gamer, plays mostly Osu, Project Heartbeat, Beat Saber, Project Diva Megamix, and Sound Voltex Konaste version. So if you don't know what Sound Voltex Konaste version means, it basically means the arcade game Sound Voltex, if you've heard of it. It's actually a game where you have a series of 4 buttons and 2 more in the lower layer and 2 not on the upper end. It's a really cool rhythm game. I highly recommend you check it out. So Sound Voltex made a home arcade version. So basically you still have to pay them to play the game, but you get to play them at home over online, I guess. And according to some people, you can actually save money by subscribing to it on a subscription basis. If you do play it almost every day and very, very often, this could save you more money than you spend tokens on it. And also big shout out to Harukawa Tinta. That's my good friend that I found when he was streaming Sound Voltex as well. Do check him out, link in the description. Right, let's get into cleaning up our board and let's get straight to it. So I'm not too worried about Beat Saber, Project Diva, all the other games, because these games are really easy to take care of. What I'm worried about is Osu itself. Because Osu, in my personal experience on this past many years that I've played for, you might have seen me play that game on stream during my previous Donathon last year. That game in particular is a hell for me to manage because this game is really CPU sensitive. If you have too many background services running in the background, this game can give you hell with input latency, and stutters will happen if you are really choked on CPU. So CPU becomes a heavily important portion of things, and we're gonna keep that very strictly in mind. But considering a rhythm gamer is usually just a casual gamer, we're gonna start worrying about the CPU first, then we'll worry about everything else later. So starting first, it will be very, very nice to separate the P cores and the E cores so that Windows will be managed on the E cores and the game would be deadly focused on the P cores. So the Intel's recent series, the Intel 14th gen, would be a great candidate for that. Sadly, I'm so sorry fellow guys. The problem is that hitching is a real pain for every rhythm gamer. So we will have to worry about that. So we're gonna look into Core i7, i9, and i7 Extreme just in case. And we're gonna look into... oh damn, I can't really read the Core family names. We're gonna look into the 14 gen like this. 14. There we go. And I can kind of see that the 14700K and the 14900K are the most popular choices, but we're gonna compare between the two because I don't think one would spend this amount of money for a 14900K just for a rhythm game. So we're gonna have a careful good look at it. So the 14700K has let's see, 20 core count. Okay, now that we're on Intel's page for the 14700K, we can see that they're giving it 8 P cores and 12 E cores, which is kind of good in my opinion, because Windows would have a lot more cores to manage their background services horseshit tomfoolery around, with the 8 cores all left for Osu to manage, which is kind of good stuff, because for Osu in particularly, more cores doesn't necessarily mean good. But with multi-threading enabled, it can benefit it to some degree, as long as these cores are not being occupied by anything else. So we have a whole lot of breathing room from here. When I mean a whole lot, I mean like a whole lot. That means we don't really need the 14900K. We can go any lower than that if we wish to save money from here. So the price for this would be 389. So we're gonna go see if we can find anything lower than that. How about 14600 in some sense? There's no 6 yet? Aw, drat. Fine, the 14700K is the only choice. We could go with the 13s, but we're gonna stick with future proofing for now, because this is going to be a real problem if this rhythm gamer does not wish to upgrade for another 5 years. Right, CPU cooler, we can worry about you later. We're getting straight to the motherboard first. So the 14700K is an overclockable chipset, so it would be a great added bonus to be able to have a Z series chipset. But it is also fine to pick up a B series chipset if you're not planning to overclock it. But there is a slim chance that you might end up overclocking on this kind of setup, so it is always advisable to pick up a Z series chipset for this one. Right, getting onto the memory, we're gonna hop back here and find out how much is it supported officially. With DDR5, it only supports up to 5600 megatransfers, which admittedly is a little bit slow, but we can overclock it, right? So according to the general market, 6000 megatransfers is the usual sweet spot for overclocked gaming, so we're gonna pick that speed up. And in terms of RAM amounts, if this person knows how to manage their background processors, I don't think we would need that much of RAM. Probably 16 gigs would be more than enough, honestly. But since this person only plays rhythm games on this PC, we would be giving what's best for them. Those channels with 16 gigs. That's it. Very simple. We don't need to say much. But in terms of speed though, we're gonna give 6000 megatransfers. Let's see what they got. 6000, 6000, 6000, 6000. That's the only absolute top that we can find. And currently on the budget line, we currently got the Kingston Fury Beast. Sounds interesting. And interestingly enough, if I just look below it a little bit, there's a slightly shorter latency version of it at the cost of what, $4? Yeah, just $4. If you're willing to take that trade-off, I say pick this up instead. It's not too bad, really. Now let's get into the CPU cooler. Cooling the 14700K is going to be one hell of a moment. It says processor base power at 125 watt. Considering how we're going to cool a space heater, we're going to need to worry about cooling a whole lot more. And remember when I say how an AIO is a hassle? Admittedly, it is a hassle, but if you're going to build once and forget forever, I say the AIO is fine. It's just, if you live in a tropical country or a very, very hot country, chances are there might be an extremely slim chance that water may or may not evaporate through the tubes. At least that's what happened with my personal experience, and I hear a bit of gurgling on my AIO. Maybe I'm just unlucky with my own AIO and something, and I'm just hating on AIOs like a stupid Karen. Okay, with that said, let's have a good look at what I've known for a long time, the NZXT Kraken. Let's see if it can handle the thermal design power that it's meant for. Usually if you do have a baseline for other computers, you can have a look at the reviews of some other processors based off what you know. However, Intel itself is a space heater, so the 7600X is not really close at all when it comes to the TDP or thermal design power, or basically the amount of heat it's dissipating in wattages. So we'll probably have to get out of our way and actually Google it. You may be wondering why I've been calling Intel a space heater. That's because my previous processor was a 7700K, and that thing is really hot. It's so hard to tame the Noctua NHD15 on that processor. It's like trying to tame a dragon, but that dragon just keeps screaming at your face for no reason. And for some interesting reasons, I looked at reviews for the more recent processors, and it seems like Intel hasn't learned a thing or two about improving their processes. Now, looking at the compatibility from NZXT themselves, it is said that they're compatible with Core i9, i7. That's all we need to hear, honestly. However, it would be nice if we got to see the TDP that they're supported, in the sense that if they're able to cool down a certain level of TDP, that would have been a nice thing to see. But I think this would be fine, because considering rhythm games are not really a stress tool, I think this should do fine. Right, following that, storage. Rhythm games usually have a good load of beat maps, say particularly for OSU and Project Heartbeat players. There will be a lot of community beat maps and you're going to be downloading a lot, so I would say you need at least 1 terabyte of storage, or 500 if you're really tight on the budget, but 1 terabyte is always the way to go. I would have recommended the Kingston NV2, but if we're going ham on the speed, it would be best for you to pick up the 970 EVO Plus. It has amazing boot speed, amazing load speed, and durability, godsend sometimes. So I highly recommend that. In fact, my current PC currently has the 970 EVO Non-Plus, but it is still very good and it boots really quickly as well. So I highly recommend that. It has great reputations. You don't have to bat an eye at the others, the 980 or the 990s, because the performance curve is going to get really thin from there on. So I guess this would be a perfect middle ground for having a premium and fast SSD. GPU. Now this is where we'll have to worry a teeny tiny bit about this, because Beat Saber is mentioned. Even though every other game like Osu and Project Heartbeat, they don't take as much, you could easily pick up a 3060. Beat Saber in particular, depending on your VR headset, say if you're picking up the Valve Index or 5K and above resolution VR headsets, you will have to start worrying a little bit about graphics really. So personally, I would recommend picking up more than a 3060. So I say somewhere around the 4070s and onwards. Probably 4070 Super. At least that would be my personal recommendations. But you can go higher than that and it would be fine. But the absolute lowest, I would say 4070. So judging by the absolute cheapest that we can find, Zotac Twin Edge. I've heard of you, Zotac. I was just about to buy you until someone came up and undercut him. Guess who? It's Pallet, my current 3060. Okay, so let's have a look at Zotac Twin Edge. I think it would be fine performance-wise. The cheapest 4070 Super I can grab in my country. Ooh, interesting. I think that would be the cheapest 4070 Super in my area as well. But I don't know, you be the judge for that. If you're looking for a hard budget at a higher end GPU, this is the way to go. Right, onto the case. I don't think you would have to worry as much, honestly. You can pick up any kind of case, honestly. As long as they fit, it'll be fine. And lucky for you, PC Part Picker grays out these case sizes that don't fit on your motherboard at all. So you can just pick the ones that fits you, which is perfect. And I've had kind of not so good experience with NZXT's case, particularly the H510i, because the H510i was a bit cooling choke to say the least, and it's a negative pressure case, which means you would want the airflow to be exhausting only. No intakes, just exhaust. Let the natural air do the intake kind of thing. But I can clearly tell that NZXT have started learning their lessons and started making the Flow series cases. So the Flow series basically is the same as their predecessors, but with meshes on the front. So that means air now don't only come from a tiny hole on the side here, but they all come from the front, which is good. Props to you, NZXT. And not to mention, this is a mid-tower case. That means it fits most parts of the rooms just fine. So I guess it would be a perfect case for them then. The H5 Flow would be nice. Right, getting into power supply. There's mostly boost clocks than anything full clock. So I would say you could just go a little bit higher, like say 750 watts. And you do just perfectly fine. So 750 watts and set that limit to 800 as the absolute top. Right, let's see what's popular. Ooh, Corsair stands on top once more. Ooh, how interesting, the SFX power supply. Though SFX basically means it is a little bit shorter than the ATX, and it's mostly for slim builds that are for tiny cases. I'm not really too sure if SFX power supply can actually fit into ATX cases, so tread with caution. Not to mention you have to face with this price premium for the small size, on top of having 80 plus platinum rating. So we're gonna look into the next few best ones. Hey, our little friend Seasonic is back with 750 watts, $84.99. That's interesting, right? We'll pick that up. Oh yeah, here we go. Operating systems. Windows 11 Home. I'm not giving two flippin' fucks about what they care. You are getting home. You're going to stay at home. Just joking. If you do want to up the price a little, then you would be fine to pick up a Pro. But that would in turn bring up the price, because currently our price range is really on a stellar high moment of 1809. And currently we got a CPU strong sided setup with a little bit of GPU strong as well. Like I wouldn't say strong, but like a GPU mid to heavy kind of side. And also a little bit of a really high end motherboard. Maybe a bit overkill for just rhythm gaming. But say in the future, like 5 years later, what if this guy wants to keep this very setup and not upgrade? So this person can just overclock away and just go at it. Sure, the current price premium sucks. But think about this. If you have the salary for it, feel free to pick it up. But if you don't, it's fine to go back to the B series chipsets. No one's going to offend you for that. If there's anyone bullying you for that, tell me. Because it's perfectly fine to use B series chipsets on an overclockable processor if you're there for the higher boost speeds or at least a better path to upgrade. Maybe say you're just saving up, so you cheap out on the motherboard, so you wait till the market price goes down and you pick up this same motherboard at a way cheaper price. You basically save yourself more money again. So there's that. Of course, you have to sell the old board first to be considered saving money, to say the least. But yeah, 180942. That's still quite a little bit extra expensive in my opinion. My kind of builds are usually on a higher price, admittedly, because how I like recommending future-proofing a lot of the setups. And I don't really like, making do with what's current, because you end up finding yourself changing them every 2 years. And that's usually not my mentality, because I like a PC to be lasting about 5 to 6 years, and you only change a part every so of that interval. Otherwise, I genuinely wouldn't recommend that. So unless you're building like something like an office computer, then going ham on the budget is perfectly fine as long as you're not cheaping out on the processor, because the processor is what keeps the entire computer together, and you can cheap out on the GPU, that's perfectly fine. You're only doing Excel sheets. You don't need a 1050 for an Excel sheet. But don't cheap out on the processor. You're going to regret it 5 years later, in my opinion. With that said, here are my 3 different kinds of build mentality for how I would build PCs for these 3 different people. At least 3 different fictional people. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, be sure to press like if you do like to see more of Melody Tensei content, tech, gaming, any kinds of sorts. Probably even vlogs. I like doing tech videos here and there like that. So I hope you enjoy, because my knowledge is still very, very limited. I'm not as knowledgeable as Linus Tech Tips, Jay's 2 Cents, Paul's Hardware, Bitwit, and the like. But I hope that my knowledge is of anything remotely helpful. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time. おつめなでした。See ya! Ugh.